Cairo, 1921. The desert sun baked the city in a haze of gold and dust, but beneath the heat and noise, a rumor stirred like a serpent through the crowded streets. A tomb had been opened. At first it sounded like countless other discoveries made by archaeologists who combed the sands of Egypt for treasures. But this tomb was different. This tomb swallowed men whole. The first to enter were laborers, poor men promised a few coins to move stones and carry tools. They stepped inside the darkness, their lanterns flickering against carved walls, and never walked back out. When they were dragged into the light, their faces were pale, their lips blue, and their eyes frozen in terror. Whispers claimed they had not simply died, but that something inside the tomb had claimed them. Soon after, foreign archaeologists went in, men of education, men of certainty. They scoffed at curses, mocked the locals' warnings, and boasted that death could not frighten science. Yet their arrogance did not shield them. One collapsed in the chamber itself, coughing blood into the sand. Another staggered back to Cairo, trembling with fever, only to die before morning. A third was crushed when a stone slab, perfectly still for centuries, shifted as if pushed by unseen hands. Each death fed the fire of rumor until Cairo itself buzzed with dread. In the markets, vendors told wide-eyed children that the tomb was cursed. In coffeehouses, men swore that ancient pharaohs had written warnings to ward off intruders. Even in the halls of colonial officials, unease spread. What had been dismissed as superstition now forced itself into reality. Carried by coffins returning one after another, the air of Cairo grew heavier, filled with the sense that the desert had awakened. Journalists from Europe caught the scent of the story. They rushed in with notebooks and cameras, eager to capture headlines that promised curses and doom. Some spoke of poisoned air trapped for millennia, others blamed unknown diseases or toxins, but the locals shook their heads. To them, no science could explain the eyes of the dead, eyes that seemed to have seen something beyond terror, something that ripped the soul from the body. The tomb became a threshold between worlds, a place where the living crossed only to meet death. Yet still, men kept going in. Greed, pride, disbelief, each drove another into the tomb's waiting mouth. And each time the tomb spat them out lifeless, as though to remind the world that its silence could not be broken without a price. Cairo could no longer ignore it. The tomb was not just a discovery. It was a wound cut open in the earth, a wound that bled fear into the veins of the city. And the question grew louder with each death. Was it coincidence, or was something ancient and merciless guarding what lay inside? The tomb had been discovered on the outskirts of Cairo, buried beneath centuries of shifting sand and forgotten structures. It was said to belong to a minor pharaoh, a ruler whose name had faded from records but whose tomb remained untouched for generations. The archaeologist responsible for the find was Dr. Edward Harrington, a man known for his ambition as much as for his skill. Harrington had arrived in Cairo months earlier, his mind consumed with maps, hieroglyphs, and the promise of fame. Local guides warned him, speaking in hushed tones about the area's history. The desert does not forgive, they said. Some stones should never be moved, but Harrington, driven by pride, ignored them. The entrance to the tomb was a narrow shaft, partially collapsed and hidden beneath layers of sand and debris. With picks and shovels, the team uncovered it, revealing an antechamber lined with inscriptions, faint but legible in flickering lantern light. The walls bore warnings carved in hieroglyphs, phrases that seemed to promise wealth and curses in equal measure. The first men to enter felt an immediate change in the air. The temperature dropped sharply, and the stillness became oppressive. Lanterns flickered violently, casting strange shadows that appeared to move independently of the holders. Some claimed they heard whispers echoing from the walls, though no one else was near. The local workers grew uneasy, refusing to enter further, but Harrington pressed on. For him, discovery meant immortality, and fear was merely an obstacle. Within days, the team cleared the main chamber. They found relics and artifacts, vases filled with oils, golden jewelry, and statues of gods whose names were almost forgotten. Yet for every treasure, a warning seemed embedded in the space. The air itself felt heavy, as though it bore the weight of centuries. The first fatality came quietly. A laborer, exhausted from moving stones, stepped into the inner chamber. Moments later, he collapsed, gasping for breath, his skin turning pale as the light drained from his eyes. Medical examination later revealed no disease, no trauma, and no reason for his death. The event unsettled the team, yet Harrington insisted the tomb be fully explored. More men entered. Each one died under strange circumstances, suffocating in the air, struck down by sudden illness, or found days later, eyes wide with terror and bodies wasted. Word reached Cairo quickly, carried by those who had survived or observed from the outside. Whispers called it cursed, and locals crossed themselves when speaking of the tomb. Religious leaders became involved, attempting rites and blessings, but none could prevent the next death. The British officials stationed in Cairo expressed concern over the mounting fatalities. Orders were given to secure the site, but Harrington ignored them, driven by obsession. His arrogance sealed the fates of others, as men who dared follow his instructions succumbed to the tomb's unseen power. Meanwhile, the surrounding area gained a sinister reputation. Nomads avoided the location, claiming the desert itself was restless, as if angered by the disturbance. Animals strayed from the site, refusing to graze or sleep nearby. Even birds avoided the skies above the tomb, their cries absent where they should have been plentiful. Harrington documented everything meticulously. Sketches, journals, photographs, they formed a record of each man who entered, each object unearthed, and each death. But no matter the detail, no explanation emerged. The tomb was an enigma, a machine of death masked as a monument to the past, and as the list of casualties grew, so did the weight of dread that hung over Cairo. Scholars debated from afar. Religious leaders warned of divine wrath, and locals whispered that the tomb's master had not died, but remained vigilant, ensuring that no man who entered could leave alive. The background of the tomb was not just its physical space. It was its history, its curse, and the human ambition that led men to challenge what should have remained untouched. It was a collision of greed, curiosity, and fate, each factor compounding the terror that would soon grip the city entirely. As word of the tomb spread, Cairo began to simmer with fear. The deaths were no longer isolated incidents, but a pattern that could not be ignored. Families whispered warnings to sons and husbands who considered joining Harrington's expedition. Merchants avoided the streets near the excavation site, their goods untouched for days, as if the city itself recoiled from the cursed location. Dr. Harrington, undeterred, pressed onward. Each day brought new dangers, lanterns that flickered and died, shadows that moved in the corners of vision, and an oppressive weight in the air that made breathing laborious. Workers complained of headaches, nausea, and a cold chill that seemed to seep into their bones. Some claimed they saw figures in the shadows, cloaked and silent, standing motionless yet following every movement. Superstitious whispers swelled into panic. Local guides refused to enter the tomb, citing ancestral warnings passed through generations. The desert does not forgive intrusion, they said. Yet Harrington's pride blinded him to caution. He brought in new men, foreign specialists, and even journalists to witness the discoveries. But one by one they succumbed to the tomb's unseen influence. The deaths became increasingly bizarre. Some men dropped dead mid-step, as if an invisible hand crushed their hearts. Others stumbled out of the tomb, babbling incoherently, eyes wide with terror, only to die hours later. Medical examinations yielded nothing, no poison, no disease, no physical cause. Rumors spread of a malevolent presence within the tomb itself. Locals spoke of an ancient guardian, a pharaoh's curse, or the restless spirits of those long dead. Tavern conversations were dominated by tales of shadowy figures, voices in the dark, and the smell of decay that seemed to waft from the tomb even when doors were sealed. Foreign observers grew wary. British officials demanded that the site be abandoned, but Harrington refused. His obsession had become mania, each new death fueling his determination rather than his fear. Nights around the tomb were restless and eerie. Even when men stayed in Cairo, sleep eluded them. Dreams were filled with darkness, suffocating corridors, and faces twisted in silent screams. Some awoke clutching their chests, trembling and soaked in sweat, claiming they had heard the tomb call their names. The rising tension was not limited to the immediate vicinity. Cairo itself seemed to hold its breath. Street animals fled from areas near the excavation, and the wind carried strange sounds at night, moans, whispers, and the faint metallic clinking of chains or tools, though no one worked in the dark. Priests and fortune-tellers became central to the growing anxiety, performing rituals near the site, sprinkling salt, reading incantations, and warning of impending doom. The public, however, was torn between skepticism and terror. Some laughed at the warnings, calling them superstition. Others avoided the streets entirely, afraid to draw the tomb's attention. Newspapers printed stories, but the accounts were inconsistent, ranging from scientific explanations to tales of ghosts and curses. Each story only amplified the unease. Inside the tomb, tension rose to a different level entirely. Every creak of stone, every flicker of lantern, every whisper of wind seemed amplified, as if the very walls conspired against intruders. Teams who entered together began to argue, panic replacing reason. Some abandoned their work midday, leaving tools and notes behind, driven not by fatigue but by an unexplainable dread. Shadows played tricks on their eyes. Echoes of footsteps mirrored their own, and the oppressive weight of centuries seemed to press down upon them. Even the bravest men found themselves second-guessing every move. Deaths became public spectacles, drawing attention from beyond Cairo. The city's authorities grew desperate, issuing warnings, but curiosity remained insatiable. Men still entered the tomb, driven by ambition, pride, or disbelief, each convinced they would be the exception, each succumbing to the fate that awaited inside. The tension reached a climax as Harrington, ignoring all warnings, prepared to descend into the tomb himself. Locals protested, priests cursed, and even his own team hesitated, fearing for their lives. Yet Harrington smiled, arrogant and determined, unaware that the tomb had already claimed him in spirit before his first step. The stage was set. The air thickened, the shadows deepened, and the tomb waited, patient, silent, and hungry, ready to prove once more that it took all who dared enter without mercy. The moment Harrington stepped into the tomb, the air seemed to shift, thickening as though it had a will of its own. Lanterns flickered violently, throwing grotesque shadows on walls carved with ancient hieroglyphs. Each step he took echoed unnaturally, as if the corridors themselves were breathing. His team followed reluctantly, every face pale, every hand trembling. The deeper they moved, the heavier the air became. It pressed against their chests, slowed their movements, and filled their lungs with an inexplicable weight. The antechamber gave way to the main hall, a massive chamber lined with statues whose eyes seemed alive in the flickering light. Golden jewels glimmered, tempting even the most fearful men, but an unshakable dread had settled in their bones. Then it began, the first death. A laborer who had tried to maintain courage suddenly gasped, clutching his throat as if invisible hands were strangling him. His eyes rolled back, and within moments he was gone, leaving the team frozen in terror. Panic spread like wildfire. Some turned to flee, but the corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting, turning, disorienting them. Whispers echoed from the walls, unintelligible but filled with menace. Harrington, heart pounding but mind fixated on discovery, pressed on, ignoring the pleas of his companions. He reached the sarcophagus of the pharaoh, its lid carved with warnings that now seemed to writhe in the lantern light. As he touched it, a low rumble vibrated through the chamber. Stones shifted, and a cold wind burst forth, carrying a stench of decay. Men screamed, stumbling back, but the tomb had already claimed them. One by one, bodies fell. Some convulsed violently as if reacting to some unseen force. Others collapsed silently, their eyes wide in terror. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with a life of their own, shadows coiling and twisting like snakes. Harrington attempted to record the events in his journal, but the ink ran as if the air itself was eating it. He realized too late that the tomb was not merely a resting place, it was a predator, ancient and merciless, designed to punish intrusion. The climax reached its apex when Harrington, standing before the pharaoh's sarcophagus, felt the final pull. His limbs froze, his vision tunneled, and a pressure unlike anything he had ever known pressed into his chest. A whisper, cold and ancient, echoed in his mind. All who enter remain. The walls seemed to close in, the statue's eyes glowing with a malevolent light. His team, scattered and dying, could do nothing. Each man's end mirrored the first laborers. Some struck down instantly, some with agonizing terror. By the time the last man attempted to retreat, the chamber had claimed all. Outside, the desert remained still, unmarked, as if nothing had occurred. Only the empty equipment, abandoned lanterns, and footprints leading in but never out told of the horror within. The climax was absolute. The tomb had fulfilled its ancient design. Every man who entered met the same fate, their bodies, spirits, or both swallowed by the darkness. No force of man, no prayer, no medicine could alter the outcome. The tomb had proven itself unstoppable, immortal, and hungry. Harrington's ambition, the curiosity of his team, and the arrogance of explorers had collided with a force older than memory. In the end, the tomb was victorious. Silence returned to the desert, heavier than before. The sand seemed to absorb the screams, the shadows, and the terror. And for the first time, the world outside knew the truth. The tomb did not yield treasures freely. It yielded death with precision and inevitability. Cairo reeled from the news. The deaths of Harrington and his entire team spread like wildfire through the city. Newspapers carried headlines that mixed fact and fear, warning that a tomb had claimed every man who dared enter. Families shunned the area around the excavation site. Merchants abandoned their stalls near the outskirts, and travelers refused to pass the road leading to the tomb. The British authorities, once skeptical, were forced to act. They cordoned off the area, forbidding further exploration, but the warnings came too late for the men already lost. The desert held its silence, but the city's whispers were loud and persistent. Scholars and archaeologists debated the cause, each offering theories that seemed to unravel under scrutiny. Some argued that poisonous gases trapped within the tomb's chambers had done the work, seeping into the air and suffocating the men. Others suggested that ancient traps, mechanical or alchemical, had been set to protect the pharaoh's resting place. Yet none of these theories could account for the uniformity of the deaths, the terror etched on each face, or the strange phenomena reported by survivors who barely escaped with their sanity intact. Locals claimed that the tomb had never been meant to be opened, that the pharaoh's spirit had sworn vengeance on any who disturbed his rest. Religious leaders from Cairo called the site cursed, performing rites at its periphery, hoping to appease forces beyond understanding. They blessed the sands, consecrated the stones, and recited prayers meant to contain the malevolent presence. Still, no one dared approach the tomb. The aftermath was felt not only in Cairo but across Egypt. Word traveled to Europe, inspiring a mixture of fascination and terror among academics and adventurers alike. Books were written, lectures delivered, but even the most meticulous accounts could not provide a solution. The tomb remained unyielding, defying both logic and faith. Families mourned the men lost, often with no bodies to bury. The desert claimed them so fully that even their remains were difficult to locate. Coffins left behind were empty, lanterns abandoned, and tools scattered, as though the tomb itself had erased the evidence of its feast. Traders reported that the wind carried strange sounds from the site, faint echoes of voices, cries, and whispers that seemed to beckon those who passed by. Some nights, travelers swore the sands themselves moved, forming patterns that resembled footprints leading to the tomb's entrance. Fear became tangible, a presence that could be felt in the bones. Psychologists of later years would attribute the hysteria to collective trauma and superstition, but at the time, no explanation calmed the city. Merchants still avoided the area, children dared not speak its name, and families prayed for the souls of those who had vanished. The authorities imposed strict orders forbidding entry, yet curiosity, as it always does, lingered in the minds of outsiders. Tales of the tomb's deaths reached archaeologists who had not yet experienced its horrors. Some prepared expeditions, thinking themselves immune to superstition, only to be warned by locals who knew better. In the aftermath, Cairo became a city shadowed by fear, the tomb standing as a silent monument to ambition, arrogance, and the unstoppable power of ancient forces. Those who dared to study it faced not just the weight of history, but the undeniable proof that some tombs were designed to kill. Over time, the story became legend. Cafes and marketplaces buzzed with accounts, some true, some exaggerated. But the essence remained. No man who entered survived. The aftermath was not merely the loss of lives, it was the imprint of terror upon a city, the reminder that curiosity can invite death, and the certainty that the tomb's hunger had not been satisfied, only delayed. Even decades after the tomb claimed its victims, Cairo's desert remained a place of fear and speculation. Scholars, adventurers, and locals alike debated what had truly occurred, yet no definitive explanation emerged. Scientists examined the site, testing air samples, soil, and remnants of the chambers, but no poison, gas, or disease was ever found. Bones recovered from shallow graves showed no trauma, no infection. Only the same pallor and rigid expressions of terror. The tomb's mechanisms, if any existed, remained elusive. Archaeologists could only speculate as the stone corridors resisted measurement. Documentation and even photography in some cases, the shadows distorting images, making walls appear warped and statues seem to move. Folklore grew around the site, merging with history. Locals spoke of spirits guarding the tomb, of pharaohs who had sworn vengeance on the living. Some claimed the air carried whispers of the dead, beckoning the curious to join them. Travelers who dared near the entrance reported nausea, vertigo, and hallucinations, feeling an irresistible pull to descend into darkness. The mystery deepened because science offered no answers. Hypotheses of carbon monoxide or toxic mold were inconsistent with the uniformity of the deaths. Every theory left questions unanswered. Why did some men collapse instantly, others slowly deteriorate, and why did the site resist explanation entirely? Paranormal investigators added layers to the enigma, suggesting the tomb was a liminal space, a threshold between life and death, where natural laws were suspended. Some claimed that a curse had been activated upon the tomb's opening, ensuring that no intruder could leave alive. Accounts of visions, whispering walls, and shifting shadows reinforced the legend, blending fact and fear. Later, archaeologists who dared approach documented strange phenomena: lanterns extinguished inexplicably, footprints appearing where none had walked, and sounds echoing from empty corridors. Attempts to map the tomb in full failed. Corridors seemed to rearrange themselves, and chambers once entered could not be found again. Even in modern times, historians remained puzzled. Ancient texts hinted at protective rituals, but none could explain the deaths with scientific certainty. The tomb's mystery remained unsolved, a challenge to reason, faith, and imagination alike. The desert held its silence, vast and unyielding, leaving the city to wrestle with the knowledge that some forces are beyond human comprehension. Scholars, priests, and skeptics alike were forced to confront the same terrifying truth. The tomb had claimed its victims, and its secrets remained intact. Its power, whether supernatural or otherwise, endured, a warning to all who might dare enter. The mystery was complete because it could not be unraveled, and the desert itself seemed to conspire in keeping it so. Even today, the tomb stands unbroken, untouched, a haunting testament to ambition, greed, and the unknown. Those who study it must contend not only with history, but with the chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed without consequence. The tomb outside Cairo remained a silent sentinel over the desert, untouched and unyielding. Generations passed, but its legend endured, whispered among scholars, locals, and travelers who dared to speak its name. The desert sands covered the entrance intermittently, yet the structure beneath remained intact, as if waiting for the next intrusion. Its victims, Harrington and his team, were long gone, yet the horror lingered. Locals treated the area with reverence and fear, performing small rituals at the perimeter, leaving offerings to appease whatever ancient force dwelled inside. Scientists attempted to study the site, mapping its corridors and analyzing air and soil samples, but each expedition returned with frustration, confusion, and occasionally unexplainable ailments. The tomb seemed alive in its silence, as if aware of observers and capable of defending its secrecy. Travelers recounted dreams of wandering corridors, of hearing whispers of the lost, and of seeing shadows flicker in the corners of their vision. Even decades later, those who approached reported a tangible weight in the air, an oppressive sense of doom that clung to clothing and skin. Historians and storytellers turned the events into lessons, a caution against arrogance, an acknowledgement of forces beyond comprehension, and a reminder of the fragility of human ambition. Religious figures framed it as divine warning, while skeptics could offer no answer that satisfied reason or conscience. Despite warnings, some were drawn by curiosity or greed, and a few disappeared, their fates blending with those of the original victims. The desert reclaimed the tomb slowly, sand shifting over time, yet it could not erase the legacy of terror it had created. Every account, every photograph, every report reinforced the same truth. The tomb had claimed all who entered, and it continued to do so in silence. It became a symbol not merely of death, but of mystery, ambition, and the unyielding power of the past. Those who ventured near, whether for study or exploration, carried the knowledge that their presence alone could awaken consequences unseen. The tomb's story became intertwined with Cairo itself, a monument to human curiosity met with inexorable fate. Legends spread, drawing the brave, the foolish, and the obsessive, each seeking answers but finding only echoes of the past. In the end, the desert held its secret tight. The tomb did not need to kill to assert power. Its presence alone sufficed to inspire awe, fear, and respect. And so it remains, centuries later, a testament to the inevitability of certain tragedies, the endurance of ancient mysteries, and the haunting truth that some doors, once opened, demand a price that cannot be escaped. The men who entered, the ambitions that drove them, and the silence that followed all became part of a single unbroken legacy. The tomb had triumphed, and it would continue to do so long after human memory faded.